Yes.
Okay. Welcome to our last week 9 of Lassoed by Marriage book club. And today we're talking about Railroaded into Marriage. I think that's the title, by Rose Ross Zediker. And she's joining us from South Dakota. And we welcome also Angie Breidenbach, who has graciously hosted this whole event. And so now I'm going to turn it over to her, and we'll hear from Rose as well. Go for it, Angie.
Thank you. Hi, this is Angela Breidenbach coming to you from Missoula, Montana, and I am thrilled to introduce to you my sister author, Rose Ross Zediker, and her book, her novella. This is from the Lassoed by Marriage romance collection. For those of you who may not have seen every single episode in our 9-week event, the Lassoed by Marriage Romance Collection Online Book Club. We've been generously hosted by the Vine, which is a bookstore at Faith Church in Dyer, Indiana. And all of these episodes, all 9 episodes, are available on our playlist at YouTube. And all you have to do is put in your Google search box, the Lassoed by Marriage author events, and you'll be able to meet all the different authors and have a lot of fun getting to know the stories behind the stories and all of the fun things about Barber Books' big, huge anthology called the Lassoed by Marriage Romance Collection. And I like to call it the Busy Woman's Book because there are 9 stories in here. And it's a really great one. If you are short on time and you love to read, you have a chance to read 9 stories, and you can put the book down and come back and have a whole new story. So it's a great busy woman's book, these wonderful anthology collections from Barber Books. And I want to tell you a little bit about the novella that we're talking about tonight. It's called Railroaded into Love by Rose Ross Zediker, and it's set in Montana in 1895. Molly is tainted by having an outlawed brother on the run and seems the least likely bride for a pastor of a chapel railroad car. Forced together by duty to family and faith, they build a life and mission together. And our author, Miss Rose Ross Zediker, is a multi-published author and a Rita finalist. Rose Ross Zediker writes contemporary and historical inspirational romances. I love that because so do I. That's fun. And has over 80 publishing credits in the Christian magazine genre for children and adults. Rose works full-time at the University of South Dakota and writes during the evenings or weekends. She's a member of American Christian Fiction Writers and Romance Writers of America. And I think it's going to be a really fun time getting to know Rose today. So I'd like to bring Rose on and turn it over to you, Rose, to have a little bit of a chat, and then we'll have questions and answers. It's all yours.
Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for wanting to read our novella. It's pretty exciting when you're included in a novella, and I'm sure the other authors have told you that we have no control over who we are placed with in our novellas, so it's exciting for the author to get to meet her fellow sister authors and make friends with them. And I so appreciate all the work that Angela has done for these, and she is so talented this way where I am not, because I would never be able to manage this on my own, so that you would all know that. What I thought I'd talk to you about is the actual chapel car that I used in my novella. It is an actual chapel car, the Emmanuel, and it's at Prairie Village in Madison, South Dakota. That is how I ran across that there were actually chapel cars back in the older times. I can't tell you the exact date that they started building them, but they ran in through the 1940s. And what they were designed for was to bring churches out west where there were no churches. So they would, in fact, do what they did in my story. They would attach a chapel car. They would have a minister, and they did like to have single men as ministers, and they would pull them out to somewhere like, let's say, Missoula, Montana, where there may not have been a church yet, and they would leave them on the spur track for this minister to bring church to the pioneers out in the West. And usually they help them try to get funds to build a church or a location, and then they would move on down the line. And you have to remember, in those days, they might have only moved down the line 14 or 15 miles, but that was a lot for people who traveled by horse or walked. So these cars could have been in what we would think are neighborhoods, but they weren't. They had to travel many miles. When I first learned of the Emmanuel Chapel car, it is now in the village for you to visit. This particular chapel car had a little bit of history to it. It was actually setting in Sioux Falls, rotting away by the railroad tracks. No, it had been abandoned and nobody had wanted it, and so the people of this pioneer village that likes to restore items bought it and they transported it, and now it sits, and one Sunday a year they actually have a service on their site in this chapel car. I have not gotten to go to that, but I would love to go to that. So I have visited the chapel car and looked into it, and it has very meager living quarters. They are very tight, but almost anything they needed was there as I described in my setting. There was a small kitchen and everything was bolted down, and then there was a bedroom, and in the Emmanuel car, it was bunk beds. There were 2. Now there are other cars that were built. The Emmanuel car was a Baptist car, and as they gained popularity, the different denominations started building their own chapel cars. And they also ran on different tracks. And the Emmanuel did run on the tracks that went up through the Dakotas and into Montana. I kept that true to life. And there were many that ran down to the south in order to build churches. There was, and I believe it was a Catholic car that was built with bigger living quarters. They actually had a kitchen type living area and then a bedroom that could house 2 people. I found that a little odd since priests aren't usually married, but the bedrooms could have housed 2 people in their car. But I tried to describe them as true to life, and I asked Angela to put a link up, so after this, if you'd like to, you can go and read a little bit on the site of the Pioneer Village about the chapel car, and there are some better pictures for you to see, but I do have a postcard, and this was the inside of the chapel car, and I tried to describe it. Can you see that etched glass panel with the gentleman's face on it? And then there were skylights up above. I'm going to try to point that out, and that was colored glass that was inside of there. It was quite nice. The paneling is quite nice. It did look beautiful. In its heyday, it would have looked beautiful. Its seats were like, the pews were like old wooden movie seats, if any of you have ever seen those or maybe remember them. And that is what, there were 2 on one side and 3 on the other side. And the organ that I described, it was standard issue for the chapel car, and it was also in and bolted down. They had water reservoirs underneath that they would have to fill for water, but that is how they would get their water into their kitchen so that they could cook. The car set many times for a month or 2 or even longer on the spur tracks, and then they would attach them and move them. They would have Christmas services in them. They would marry people in them. They would have Sunday school classes. I have a picture, an early chapel car Sunday school. It's in a book, and I'm going to try to hold it up so you can see. We're in the Sunday school class, so I'm hoping it does it justice, because you might be thinking that there would just be a few, but families were larger back then, so there were quite a few. Children?
Wow.
That was a typical Sunday school class that came to the chapel car to worship. They would have standing room only from time to time also because they only seated so many. So there was standing room only many times in their churches because people were eager to go to church. It's one thing that a lot of the pioneer women missed was having the church to go to. So they were eager when the cars came to support these churches. They did call them churches on wheels. There are a few books on the market if you are interested in this setting at all that you could read. I don't know if they're in ebook format. A few are a little pricier because they're history type books. I chose this setting because I thought that chapel cars were interesting, and until I saw this one, I didn't even realize that they had these. I guess I was under the assumption that a minister would go out into the West on a wagon train and preach the gospel, find a place to preach the gospel until they could build a church as we know it or as we think of it from Little House on the Prairie books or those types of things. So I was very interested to chapel cars that would go out into the West to bring the Word of God to them. And so I had wanted to use it in a story, and when Barber had offered to their authors that they wanted some Western themed stories and some forced marriage type stories, that's when I thought it would be a good item to use, and it might educate someone else to the fact that there were chapel cars, because I really didn't know this, and I don't know how many people really do, and maybe some people this is common knowledge too, but it wasn't to me. And there are many chapel cars that are restored and in historic places that you can go visit, but there are also some that they have restored that they use for modern day train rides, like on dinner trains, or you can get married on them. I think there's one in Wisconsin that is restored and you can get married on it, but it is restored modern and not to the period time. So that's really all I have to talk about was that. I don't know if any interesting or not. I have had a few reviews that thought that it was a good setting for a story. So if it's okay, I think we could open it to question and answers, Angela.
You betcha. So, ladies there in Dyer, Indiana, and if you have questions and thoughts that you'd like to know, then I'm going to give you just a second because I'm going to ask a question really quick. I did not realize until you wrote this story how common at the time chapel cars were. My dad was a huge train buff, and I have train books and videos galore here that I inherited that I haven't gotten into as much as I want to yet. But my question was, I wonder if they baptized people on these chapel cars.
You know, I have not read anything about that, but I would think so because they were pretty much full-service churches. They could do anything that the church could do. That they were trained ministers that they put in the ministry, the chapel car ministry. So I'm certain if they were authorized to, they performed any type of service necessary. I never found anything about a funeral. Now, it would have been hard to get a casket down their aisle, but I think they were pretty much a full-service church when they were parked for the city. They were there to serve the city.
Well, they might have been able to do it, you know, outside or something where they, you know, with that many people.
Right.
But it just blew my mind when you were talking about the water, and my immediate thought was, oh, is this a baptism opportunity?
Well, cool. and there's no baptismal font the way that we think of them today inside of the chapel car that I viewed, because you see everything because it's anchored down. But they do make a point to say they had a water reservoir in them, so perhaps they did do baptisms and they just had a special bowl or something that they used after they blessed the water. But as you said, many times they were baptizing people in ponds or rivers or lakes in that era too.
Awesome. ladies there in Dyer, Indiana at the Faith Bookstore, at the Vine Bookstore at Faith Church. We're turning the questions over to you.
Well, I would just like to say, first of all, thank you for being with us today. And also, thank you for that explanation, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask, because I had never heard of a chapel train car. And reading the book, I couldn't imagine how they had pews and an organ and an altar and sleeping quarters and a kitchen with a table, all in a train car. So I really appreciate that explanation, because now I have a better understanding.
And it was very compact, and if you would just Google railroad chapel cars, you will pull up a few sites and you can see various pictures of them, and it's a little easier for you to see in your mind, because we think of them as being so compact, but where they were long, it was just everything was long compared to what we think of as square. But it was very compact, but the cupboards in the kitchen were made of nice wood, and it was a small stove, but it was a nice cast iron type stove. It wasn't anything that looked cheap or that it would be inefficient. They were constructed very beautifully.
What other thoughts and questions do you have there, ladies?
Where did you, how did you come up with the idea for this particular, I mean, other than the chapel car, I understand where you would get that, but how did the story of Molly and her brother come together?
Well, it is really hard for me, because I'm such a realist, to think that, and I do believe that there are definitely love at first sight and sparks of attraction, but it's hard for me to believe that anybody would ever follow that very first spark and be married within a day or two. So it's very hard for me when I think of marriage of conveniences that complete strangers would just be married within hours. And it works. I read lots of books that I like that way, but in my mind, I can't reconcile that. But I can reconcile people who know each other that think, okay, we need to get married to fix this situation. Or in the instance for my story, he was being noble to a woman's memory that he had, her mother, Molly's mother. He was being noble and respectful to her memory by marrying her daughter, so she didn't have to go back to a tainted life in a saloon. So that's where I came up with that, because then that was more plausible to me, that a man would be honorable and marry someone's daughter just to save her from a poor reputation in life. And from there I could go on and have them fall in love. And that's when, of course, she had to have a reason to be there, so I gave her an outlaw brother. My husband is a big Western movie fan, so, you know, outlaws are always outlaws. So they always work as the bad guy if they're doing something as an outlaw. And I didn't want to have them be murderers, but rustlers were considered really bad outlaws too in those days, and that's why I made him a rustler and a gambler.
Perfect for Montana. What other thoughts does that bring to mind?
Until the end, I really thought, I didn't think that her brother would be the rustler. I thought someone was trying, you know, and stole, you know, traded places with him or something. So that was a surprise to me at the end. Not that it was bad, but it was a surprise.
Well, I'm glad it was a surprise and you didn't see it coming. That's always nice for an author to hear, because, and I'm sure Angela can attest to this, and if you're avid readers, I'm sure you can too, that sometimes you can figure out the plot line. So I like to have a little twist or like a second ending on my book, so that you don't always figure it out and read and think, okay, this is how this happily ever after is going to work. I like to put in a little twist, and in this case, because Noah felt his family thought he was a coward, I wanted it to appear that he was cowardly when he was actually going to get the gun to help her. And I did have someone put in a review that they thought they didn't know what to think of the hero when he didn't help the heroine. And then they said it worked out in the end, though, because I needed him to be heroic and also be a man of God and not a murderer. So I needed to get him away so he could surprise the outlaw.
Yeah, that was a surprise as well. Why did his family consider him a coward? Was it just because he wanted to be a pastor?
It was because they were all lawmen. They were all lawmen, and that's what they wanted him to go into, and he wanted to preach the word of God. So they considered him a coward for not being a lawman.
I find it interesting because I think that it often takes more courage to preach the gospel or to share your faith than it does to, you know, go after and attack something. So I thought that was really interesting. That the other side of courage, quite often, and I think it is harder to speak up and speak out than it is to just take an action. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Right, and back in that era, you know, men were macho men, cowboys. They would have been rough and tough. And if you came from a and you were a little more genteel, they thought a little less of that in those days. So sometimes you have to put it in context with the historical era that you're reading or writing about also.
Very true. What other questions do y'all have there?
Well, I have a question/comment. I really like the part where the little boy Tom brought that kerchief or whatever full of the raspberries, and she took it and put it on the table to see if it would wiggle, because she knew that boys typically would put a frog or a snake or something like that in there. And so I was going to ask you if you have brothers or little boys or something that you had that experience and you threw that in the book, or if you just, you know, thought it up.
Well, I do not have brothers. I do have a son. He did not bring things into the house like that, but I grew up by boy cousins who would throw worms on you or frogs, or I had a boy cousin who would keep frogs in his pocket. So that's kind of where I got those ideas from, that a little boy might have something other than something good in the bag. I'm sure the little boy thought it would be good. But yeah, so I would have to credit my cousin to that.
Yeah, that was very cute, and I couldn't believe that little boy was only 8 years old. I mean, you know, for him to live in a lean-to and be able to go to the store and buy groceries, and, you know, I know times were different, and he obviously had to grow up very quickly, but I reread part of it to go back and see exactly how old is this kid, you know, because he was little enough that he did little cute things, but still, to imagine an 8-year-old, breaks my heart.
And it was in that era. Many times people were orphans and they were on their own at a young age until they had orphanages. But in the middle of the West and the Plain States, which are large and very unpopulated, they would be on their own.
You know, I want to put in one thing here too. Even today, we don't realize how many people in the world are still in that kind of a situation. And when you deal with orphans or inner city kids or kids over in other countries who are maybe 8, 12 years old caring for younger siblings because their parents have died or something like that, and they're trying to feed them, they're trying to work at such a young age, it's almost like those countries are still back in the frontier in the West. They haven't come forward into the 21st century because their kids are still having to do that today. And it amazes me.
Right.
And I read this a few days ago, so I may have forgotten, but did Tom know that Cass was his dad?
That was my question, because he didn't really reference, but he referred to him, but he never referred to him as his father, especially when speaking with Molly.
Right. Did he know that, or did he not?
No, I didn't have the boy know that he was the father. I just had that he gave him money to help him, but I didn't make it knowledge to the boy that he knew that Cass was his father. And so that's why Molly only had inner thoughts that he would resemble her brother, or it would strike her from time to time about his eye color, so that the boy wouldn't, so there would be nothing said to the boy about who his parentage was.
And yeah, anybody can interrupt me if I'm talking too much. But I also wondered if you had a thought of what made Cass turn bad. Because Molly was so confident the whole time that, they were raised in this Christian home, and she was sure that he would never be a cattle rustler. But what in his life, other than maybe his parents' death, I guess, but what made him turn into this? Just this need that he had to survive and he had no other way?
Right. In my mind, it was because of the grieving that his parents died and he was left to raise his sister. So he was left with the responsibility to raise his sister, and he was a young man, and it's not what he wanted. So he tried to get money to save their farm, and he couldn't do that because he gambled it away, and then he gambled his sister away, and so then he just turns to a life of crime. And that's not explained so much in the novella, because I don't know, like for Angela's, but I was given X amount of pages to write. So it's hard when you're writing that. I had 15,000 words to write that story with. It's hard to get just your hero and heroine's backstory. So you just have to hope other people see, as you said, was it losing his family? It was losing his family, but there weren't enough words to develop that in this novella.
Yeah, and I think that's, I don't know if you joined into any of the other sessions, but that seems to be a very common thread. But that's also, I think, what's made this format kind of fun, because it does leave us with questions that, we can kind of try to understand where your mind was going, and because it's not really explained, and it couldn't be.
Right. It's fun to write short works, but you really have to be concise. And that's another reason I picked a chapel car, because when you're writing 15,000 words, you need your couple together constantly, and so they can't get away from each other. And I realized I would have them walk out each other, but for the most part, they would have been basically locked together in this chapel car, which would be probably equivalent to a small trailer house today, so that they would be stuck together, they fall in love in a short amount of time, because I think that's another thing that works against you there. They have to fall in love in a short amount of time too.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's tough to write. The shorter is harder to write than a long book, because you have so much time. You can develop relationship, and you can develop events, and you can't do that with a shorter piece like this.
Right.
What other thoughts and questions do y'all have over there?
I have a question, and this is just more for fun. So, Rose, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. And I really enjoyed the book. And so it was so much more like the afterthoughts, like what happened after. So by putting you on the spot, if you had to tell us a little bit about, what do they call it, the epilogues? What would your version be if you had to think
of the epilogue? I think that the epilogue to my story would be that Molly, they were happily married, and that they arrived in a town where they were able to build a church, and then they could have lived in the town and started their own family along with raising her nephew. So that was what my epilogue would have been. And that's an interesting question that I'm glad that you asked. I've had several people tell me, we need to read Cass's story. We need to know about him. And I think it's because I tried to make him so cocky and arrogant. And so I've had people say that, but the problem is that unless Barbara is wanting to do something along those lines, it's really hard to write a second in a series from a novella. I don't know. What do you feel about that, Angela?
It is tough to write another part of the series, and I've gone ahead and done it, but I think the difficulty is that trying to connect the different series that they're in to show this is a continuing story, because I've done that with Montana Beginnings, and I'd intended to do 10 novellas in the series of Montana Beginnings, and they ended up in, I think, 4 different series. And so then, this is a continuing story. It's a marketing feat, I'll tell you.
It would be, because if I could do a second in a series, then I could wrap up Noah and Molly and Tom's in Cass's story, and you would know what happened, that they had settled in a town and were happily married, maybe had a child of their own along with Tom and went on the way. But that would have been my epilogue. They would have lived happily ever after, and he would have had his own church. He would have stayed being a pastor of a church.
Would Molly have learned to cook?
I think she would have learned to cook better. How does that sound?
That always made me so sad. And Noah handled it so graciously. But I felt so bad for her.
And that's hard for me to write, because I came from a family of cooks. So I know how to cook, and I've known how to cook. I mean, I'm sure you all know how to cook too, but I've known how to make bread or homemade noodles or all these things my whole life since I was young. And so when I read stories about people that don't know how to cook, I always go, how can that be? But yet I have a very good friend who does not know how to cook very well, because her mother was a working mom, and she just didn't have anyone to teach her how to cook. She didn't live close to her grandmother's. So I thought, well, I need to give Molly something. She's been trapped away for a few years. She had to have forgotten her skills. So, maybe we should answer that question, that the more she cooked, the more she remembered how her mother cooked, and she did become a good cook.
That's better. That's good. I'm glad.
Okay. All right. And, it's really even okay if you make up your own ending of what happened to them, too. That's always interesting, too.
Yeah, that's like fan fiction.
Right.
Send in story ideas for how that happens or whatever. I think it's fun. Another way, though, I'm going to give you an idea, Rose. Maybe you could write an ending for just a short little 2,000 to 5,000 word thing for your newsletter or for your website. Ladies, what else would you like to ask?
Well, I have a general comment.
Okay.
I think we touched, I don't know, a few sessions ago, talked about like the women and how strong they are. And this story, the part that got me is when she was going to buy her dress, because she didn't have any other dresses. We open our closets and we have all these dresses, and I know it's something so simple, but just kind of a personal thing. Maybe 5-6 years ago, my mom started really getting into our family history, and she started. It started when one relative died, and she was going through their home, and she was writing love letters and this and that and blah blah blah. She ended up tracing us back to the American Revolution, and so I'm a member of the DAR. The American Revolution, which is pretty cool, but I never really respected all of the work my mom did. So every time I'd go home, she'd be sitting there with like hundreds of pictures spread out, and
you know, this is Uncle Frank and so-and-so, and he was married to this person, and then he died of this, and he had kids, but at that time you could do this and that, and blah, blah, blah. But these stories have just inspired me to really sit her down and say, okay, Mom, here's my dictaphone, start telling, because it is so amazing and so remarkable, these things these women in all of our families have had to endure and had to go through just to give us, you know, our lives and our background. And it's really beautiful. And then I look at all these pictures and I'm thinking to myself now, which dress was that? You know, was that their good dress? Was that their only dress? You know, how much did that cost? What did they have to go through to get that? I mean, and some of the little things are really the neat things. I mean, that dress piece in this story just really was really cool for me because I felt like I was there.
Right. And sometimes it is a little detail, and we really don't know. We really take for granted how easy we have it. I try to never take for granted, since I have worked full time my whole life, anything that any women who came before me in an office setting did, so that I would have it easier. So I try not to take that for granted, but I can, even as a little girl growing up in the 60s, I still had more clothes than I needed. And sometimes they were hand-me-downs, and sometimes my mother made them. But I can't hardly imagine having one good dress and two work dresses, so that you had one on while you washed the other one. But that was just their life. And then we have to think, if they lived in the middle of the prairie or the mountains, there was nowhere to go to get fabric for a new dress or to make a new dress. And so, yeah, it seems funny and odd, but it is a good detail to show their life, to show the way the hardship of their life was.
I just have to say I'm excited that you said you're a member of the DAR, because I am just now joining from the attorney. So that is so cool to meet you. Cool, yeah.
It's hard. I don't know. You know, the chapters are hard to come by. My mom is very active because she has a chapter that's very involved where she is, and I knew her to the area. So when I came down here, like, I don't know, maybe because I was younger, some of these women, you know, in their 70s, kind of. I'm trying to be involved and. I got shot. But it's very interesting, and I think if we all look back at our family histories, I mean, it inspires you. I try to get that's only one side of the family. My other side of the family, we don't know a lot about. And I think just your stories, we've all commented, oh, this is great, and some of them come from your personal families. I think if we all look at our own families, the stuff that we dig up, maybe didn't tell everybody.
And actually, that's true. I know a few of those stories from, I am actually 5th generation on my dad's side that came from Scotland. They came through Ellis Island. They came down through Minnesota, through the Indian Wars, and they settled in an area that I live in, about 10 miles away. And he actually prospered. He helped create a town. He helped pioneer a town. But he was a stubborn man, and there were lots of stories about them. But I can see how it shaped some things in our family. When you go back and watch things like Downton Abbey and how clan-type things are, it really helps my sister and I understand why we act, or our family acted and did some of the things they did. And it's because we are 5th generation, but my grandfather was 3rd generation. He heard this man speak Gaelic, and my grandfather's father spoke Gaelic with his father. So there are things that we understand now that we might not pronounce quite right, and it's probably because of how it was handed down through the generations to us.
I'm actually 3rd generation from Ireland, and my mom's 81. I got out with her, and I was like trying to get all the names I possibly could. Because when my grandmother came over from Ireland and my grandpa, it was so hard. Life was so hard. There were so many kids, and she was the oldest. that she wouldn't talk about it. And it just was, life was just so hard.
Right.
So I really would love to know, like, you know, if I even have relatives still there, you know, I'm sure I do. If she lied about her age to come over.
Well, that happened a lot, I think, so that they could get on the ships. Yeah.
Yeah. She spoke, I mean, she had a thick accent, a Gaelic accent.
Sometimes they lied about everything from their age to their family name, you know, to whether or not they'd ever had children or if they'd ever had a specific disease or a problem, because at the time they were going through Ellis Island, there were so many restrictions suddenly put on that they had to get clearance somehow. So there was a lot of things that were changed and hidden in order to bring people through and give them a new life, or to get through so that they could send for other family members. So there's, yeah, and especially things like had they fought in another sovereign country's army or anything like that, it could have even been a problem. So hiding their names became an issue, and that's makes it difficult for genealogy. What other thoughts and questions do you have? Well, I want to show you, if I may, while you're thinking of some. Rose, I'm going to have you talk about your blog just a little bit. So I'm going to put it on screen share, if you don't mind. And then you can tell a little bit about your blog.
Okay. My blog is called Don't Quit the Day Job, because I've been writing since 1991, and I did start out with short stories. But unlike the television show Castle, where they're bestsellers and have lots of money, that's not quite how it ever worked out for me. So I've never been able to quit my day job while I've written, but I started writing short stories for children because my son was about 10 when I decided that I would want to try to write for publication. And so I had to write things that were shorter, that didn't take a lot of time, that I could work on when I had the time. And I took a couple of correspondence courses through Institute of Children's Literature, and I started in 1991, and by 1994 I had published 2 short stories, and then it just kind of went from there. And the bio that she read said 80. I have well over 100 short stories now between adults and children's Sunday school take-home papers, in addition to 10 books, and I've done this all while I've worked full-time. So that's why my blog is titled Don't Quit the Day Job. The day job supplies things so you can pay your bills, and you can eat, and you can have gas in your car while you're still chasing and fulfilling your dream. And you can have health insurance and those things that we all need, that the writing is so sporadic. And some of it is because the publishing field, it takes a long time. Not just so much a long time to get a book contract, but from the time you get a book contract to the book is actually published, it's usually a year or longer. So advance is only stretched so far, and that's why I've always worked and written on the side. And I would say that I do, there's been times I say I work 2 full-time jobs, meaning my writing's full-time, but most of the time it's full-time and a part-time job for me. And I will say I haven't updated my blog since January. I'm taking a little hiatus, and after this quarter, I took a quarter off. I plan on being more active on my blog again.
Smart woman.
It's hard to come up with blog posts that you think are interesting to someone or isn't repetitive from the last time you did it. I like to do a little series at Christmas time. I've done my childhood toys, my son's childhood toys. I've done Christmas books and Christmas songs, or Christmas movies. I think I'm going to do Christmas songs this year. So that always brings a lot of people to my blog then.
I'm going to share again really quick because I want to show you some of the other book titles that Rose has. And so, one second, there we go. All right, so she has The Widow's Suitor, and she has, of course, Lassoed by Marriage.
And can I say, Angela, The Widow's Suitor is the book that I had the Rita nomination on.
Ooh, definitely say that.
It's only available in ebook now because it's only on the shelves, was on the shelves a very short time. As a matter of fact, it was out of print by the time it was a Rita nominee. But it is still available through ebook.
And you've also got Reclaiming the Cowboy's Heart, and then Dakota Love. What were you going to tell us about Dakota Love?
Dakota Love is another one published by Barber Books, and what it is it too high? It's a 3-in-1 book, and these are contemporary stories about quilting, and all the heroes and heroines are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s in the books. So,
will you hold it up one more time?
Pardon me?
Will you hold it up upside down? Screen share to. Okay. And you said that the people are in there are how old?
They're in their 40s, their 50s, and their 60s. And these books were my first book contracts, and Barber editor had put on her blog that they needed gray-haired love. That's her term, not mine. And that is how I sold. I thought of an idea using older characters, and that is how I sold. And I used the quilting theme because my mother was a quilter, and there's quilt blocks with biblical names, and that's the stories. Lily of the Field, Rose of Sharon, and Job's Tears are all quilt blocks with biblical names. And my mother helped me get that done, but my mother didn't live to see my book published.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's bittersweet, but I know that she knows that. But she helped me find all of the quilt blocks and their names, and track them down because she had more quilt books than 6 people would ever need. And so she helped me find them so I would know what they looked like and how to describe them. And she was very excited about it when the editor asked for the full. But 2 months after my mother passed away, they gave me the contract for the book. So,
wow.
What a nice tribute to her, though.
it is. And the first book is dedicated to her.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we have a few more minutes. Is there anything you'd like to ask?
I wanted to say it was interesting hearing you say that about the gray-haired generation, because I have noticed, I've been reading a long time, and I have noticed lately that most heroines of the books that I have read, not counting The Lassoed by Marriage, the heroines are older. It used to be they were always in their 20s, but now it's they are in their 40s. They've been divorced or widowed or something like that. And I wondered if that was a new trend, if only people that age are still reading books, or the younger kids are busy on their laptops or something. I don't know, but you know.
Well, I think there's a demand for it because of the baby boomers. And in my book, Reclaiming the Cowboy's Heart, this one, those characters are in their 40s in this book also. I think the baby boomers are wanting to read older characters, and I get a lot of good feedback from people my age or older that they enjoy reading the book with older characters because they can relate to the issues better than the 20-something people, because that's been so long ago for them.
Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
I'd also like to add that, yes, the publishers are asking for older characters now because of the baby boomer generation. We do have a large population that are starting to get, it's not that the younger generation's not reading, they are, but that the boomer generation was a boom. And it's such a huge purchasing power that publishers have started to recognize this, and the boomers are retiring or already retired. So now they actually have the time to read that they didn't have when they were in the builder section of their. So they've let us have more fun as authors to branch out from those teens and 20s to have characters of more mature ages.
Rose, what was your book that won the Rita Award again?
It was a nominee. I didn't win. It was a nominee, but it's The Widow's Suitor.
Okay.
And they are young. They're a young couple.
What's the quick blurb about that book?
She is a homesteader whose husband's died, and she plans on proving up her claim. She has a baby, and actually the hero helps deliver her baby. And he has come to town. It's set in there's a real town called Faith, South Dakota, and the town of Faith, South Dakota was developed because the railroad decided to come in and put a turnabout in there, and he came in to make his fortune, and he helps her to fulfill her homestead claim.
Awesome, thank you.
So it would be classified as a prairie romance.
Prairie romance, okay.
Are all of your titles similar in that way? Historical, Western, or prairie romance? Or do you have something else?
Actually, I only have 3 historicals. The one that you read, Railroaded into Love, The Widow's Suitor, and Sweet on the Cowgirl. And that is about a trick writer whose father makes her dress like a man. And she wants to dress like a girl. And she's trying to convince him that they will make more money if it's a girl being a daredevil than a man. And she falls in love with a soda pop king who's going to sponsor the male trick writer. And then the rest of mine are contemporary, and they are not necessarily set in the West.
Did you give us the link already, Angie, to the blog or the website where you had all our titles?
Yes, I did. I put it on the sidebar, but let me read that to you, just so that it's clear for everybody listening. It is called Don't Quit the Day Job is the title of the blog, and then the actual link is rosszediker.blogspot.com, and it's spelled ROSSZEDIKER, and the S is in sugar all the way through. rosszediker.blogspot.com.
Thank you.
Bet. Any other thoughts or questions, ideas, anything you'd like to share?
I think we've asked all our questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rose, for spending time with us this evening.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you. I hope you all enjoyed the book, and opportunity. This is fun. Honestly, you are people that I probably would have never gotten to meet as readers, and it's nice for authors to meet readers of any kind, whether you're our readers or readers, because readers are what supports authors, and not just us, as in Angela and the rest of the authors, but authors all over. So thank you for being readers and for sponsoring this. And if any of you are on Facebook, I would really love it if you could just like my author page. You don't have to like my personal page or friend me, but I'm trying to get my likes on my author page up to 500, and I'm hovering about 350, and I can't seem to get movement. So I would really appreciate it if you could do that.
Is it under Rose Ross Zediker on Facebook? What's your author?
It is, yes.
Okay. I'm going to catch that really quick here and see if I can get that up for y'all for the link. And then Facebook. Let's see what we can find here. Oh, I think I found you. All right. So, and hey, here you go. I just liked you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to show you really quick what her Facebook page looks like, and that way you can find it in the future. There we are. And I love that you have our Lassoed by Marriage cover up there right now.
I usually put whatever my most recent book is as my background like that. So
Nice.
yeah.
And so there's and we put up that we were up there live with you all. Woohoo!
Yay.
Yay. So I'm going to turn it back over to the store, but I want to thank everyone for being here with us today as we explored the Lassoed by Marriage Romance Collection together. And our guest today is Rose Ross Zediker. And we just thank you so much for being with us. And then, do you have any last words, anything you want to say?
No, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you. And thank you again, Angela, for putting this together so that we could all chat together over the miles.
I know, it's so my pleasure. This is so much a fun thing to do. So thank you so much to the Vine and to all of you there. We're going to miss you.
We're going to miss you, Auntie.
Yeah.
This was
Thank
really
you very
fun,
much.
and we can't thank you enough. And we're in the process of signing thank you cards for all the authors, and we're doing our grand prize giveaway tonight. So,
Well, good luck. Good luck.
Yeah.
for your contributions,
Yes,
and it's really added a fun element to this for us. So, thank you.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. We'll get a chance to do something like this in the future for other books. So I really appreciate it. Rose, thank you for being with us. And ladies, I'm going to turn it all back over to you so that you can finish out your evening and do your drawing. But it's really been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. And I'll send over the links to you all soon. All right. Bye-bye now.
Good night.